December 1943. The Normandy coast, somewhere between Vierville and Colleville-sur-Mer. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel stands knee-deep in freezing Atlantic water. The tide is out. The beach stretches before him, 450 meters of exposed sand from the high water mark to where Hez standing now. The December wind cuts through his greatcoat, but Rommel doesn't move. Hez studying the beach like an artist examining a blank canvas. In his hand a notebook. Hez sketching. General Dr. Wilhelm Meise, his chief engineer, stands beside him, also soaked to the knees. Meise watches as Rommel draws a series of lines across the beach profile. 6 lines, Rommel says, not looking up from his sketch. From here, he gestures to the low tide mark where they're standing, to there. He points to the high water mark 450 meters inland. Every meter covered. Every approach blocked. Meise studies the sketch. The labor requirements are irrelevant. Rommel cuts him off. I want mines to sink ships, and mines to sink landing craft. I want some minefields designed so that our infantry can cross them but not enemy tanks. Rommel draws another line, and another. 6 bands of obstacles, each designed to destroy landing craft at different states of the tide. When they come, Rommel says quietly, they will come at high tide. They'll want to land close to the beach. He looks up from his notebook, staring out at the gray Atlantic. We're going to make that impossible. This is the moment the Atlantic Wall transforms from a propaganda myth into an engineering reality. Not the concrete bunkers. Those were already being built. Not the gun batteries. Those had been under construction since 1942. The obstacles. The underwater obstacles. The things that would stop the invasion before it even reached the shore. Rommel has just invented the most sophisticated beach defense system ever conceived. And in 6 months, 2 American bulldozers will render it almost meaningless. Early January 1944. The same beach. Night. Searchlights flood the tidal zone. Hundreds of men work in the freezing water. German soldiers, French laborers, impressed workers from occupied countries. They work in shifts around the clock. The sound of hammers on steel echoes across the beach. Welding torches throw shadows across the sand. They are building obstacles. The first line goes in at the low tide mark. Wooden ramps. 8-meter logs resting at an angle on wooden supports, one end buried deep in the sand, the other pointing toward the coast. Steel sawtooth blades are bolted to each ramp. Then Teller anti-tank mines waterproofed and wired to the tops of the logs. When a landing craft passes over at high tide, the mine detonates. Or the sawteeth rip open the hull. Or both. The engineering is elegant. The logs are angled precisely to catch the flat bottom of a landing craft. The mines are positioned to detonate against the weakest point in the hull. Everything is calculated, but the work is brutal. At first, the engineers try to drive the logs into the sand with pile drivers. It's backbreaking. Slow. The Atlantic keeps washing the holes away. Then someone has an idea. They bring up the fire engines from the local towns. The fire hoses connected to pumps can shoot high-pressure water streams. They aim the streams at the sand, letting the water blast holes deep enough for the logs. The logs slide in. The sand settles around them. Ingenious. By late January, the first line is complete. Now the second line. These are wooden poles, simpler than the ramps but just as deadly. Straight posts 15 centimeters in diameter driven into the sand at angles pointing seaward. Each one has a Teller mine strapped to the top. At high tide, they're submerged. Invisible. A landing craft driving over them at speed will impale itself and detonate the mine simultaneously. The engineers plant them in rows 12 to 15 feet apart. Hundreds of them. The pattern is mathematical. Dense enough to be unavoidable, spaced enough to be efficient with materials. Third line, Belgian gates. These are the engineering marvels. 10 feet tall, weighing over 1,500 pounds each. steel frameworks that look like enormous farm gates, hence the name. The French called them Element C after Colonel Cointet, who invented them for the Maginot Line. The Germans are recycling them from Belgian and French defensive positions, hauling them to Normandy by the hundreds. Each gate takes 6 men to maneuver into position. They're planted upright in the sand, rows of them forming steel forests. When a landing craft hits a Belgian gate at speed, the gate doesn't break. The landing craft does. 4th line nutcracker mines. These are diabolical. A steel rail, straight up or angled like a spear, set in a cavity in a concrete foundation. The cavity contains either a teller mine, an artillery round, or an explosive charge. When a vessel hits the rail, pushing it down the rail acts as a trigger. The explosive detonates upward directly into the hull. The engineers call them Nussknacker mine, nutcrackers, because they crack landing craft like walnuts. 5th line tetrahedrons, concrete pyramids 3 or 4 feet tall. Some are steel. Some have additional steel rails welded on for extra hull ripping capability. They're cast on site or brought in from other defensive positions. Simple geometry, brutal effectiveness. And 6th line near the high water mark Czech hedgehogs. 3 or more steel rails, each about 6 feet long, crossed and welded together at the center. They look like enormous children's jacks. The name comes from their origin, the Czechoslovak Beneš Line fortifications overrun by Germany in 1938–39. The Germans simply recycled them. Some hedgehogs have concrete bases added to prevent them from rolling. Some have mines attached. All of them are designed to gut landing craft or flip them over. By March 1944, the work accelerates. Rommel drives his engineers relentlessly. He rewards productive units with gifts. One particularly industrious unit receives an accordion. He posts production quotas. He visits construction sites, personally expecting progress reports. The statistics become staggering: 56,000 Czech hedgehogs across likely invasion beaches, 21,000 Belgian gates, 500 Hemkurven, curved rail anti-tank obstacles, over 10,000 nutcracker mines. At Omaha Beach alone, the density reaches its peak. Now 750 obstacles, across 7,500 yards of beach. That's 0.49 obstacles per linear yard. The highest concentration of any beach in France. Average weight per obstacle at Omaha 401 pounds. Each one mined. Each one positioned with mathematical precision. Each one designed to destroy landing craft attempting to reach the shore. The German engineers step back and survey their work. The beach is no longer a beach. It's a graveyard of steel and concrete and explosives waiting for victims. At low tide, you can walk through the obstacle field and marvel at the engineering. The precision. The redundancy. The sheer thoughtfulness of the design. Every approach covered. Every gap closed. Every landing craft accounted for. The engineers are proud. This is 1940s military engineering at its finest. This is science defeating brute force. Rommel inspects the finished obstacles at Omaha in late April 1944. Good, he says simply. Now they cannot land. February 1944. Supreme Headquarters, Allied Expeditionary Force, London. A photograph lies on General Dwight Eisenhower's desk. It's an aerial reconnaissance image taken from 20,000 feet by an RAF Spitfire. The beach at Normandy. The photo interpreter has marked it up with notes and measurements. Eisenhower stares at it for a long time. What Hes looking at is the obstacle belt at Omaha Beach. 6 weeks ago, the beach was clear. Now it's covered with what look like tiny crosses and rectangles. The obstacles. When was this taken? Eisenhower asks. 3 days ago, sir, replies Lieutenant Colonel Arthur H. Davidson, Jr., one of the senior American engineers. And the previous reconnaissance? 2 weeks prior. The density has increased by approximately 30%. Eisenhower does the math in his head. If obstacles are proliferating at that rate by June, show me all the beaches. Davidson spreads out more photographs. Sword, Juneau, Gold, Omaha, Utah. Every one of them is now festooned with obstacles. Analysis, Eisenhower says flatly. Davidson pulls out a typed report. Omaha is the worst, sir. Current count approximately 750 individual obstacles across 500 yards of beach. That's one obstacle every 2 yards. Each obstacle weighs between 200 and 1,500 pounds. Conservative estimates 75% are mined with either teller mines or artillery shells. Can landing craft avoid them? At low tide, possibly. At high tide, they'll be submerged. Invisible. And we're landing at high tide. We have to, sir. Landing at low tide means the assault troops cross 400 yards of exposed beach under fire. Casualties would be catastrophic. Eisenhower nods slowly. So we land at high tide, which gives us deep water and shorter exposure crossing the beach. But we drive our landing craft directly into submerged obstacles we can't see. Yes, sir. Casualties. Davidson hesitates. The operational research section estimates 40 to 80% losses among the first wave landing craft. If the obstacles are as heavily mined as we suspect. The room goes silent. 80%. That means out of every 10 landing craft in the first wave, only 2 might make it to the beach intact. Eisenhower looks back at the photographs. What are our options? The British have been developing specialized armor, sir. The 79th Armored Division under General Hobart. They've built tanks that can clear mines, lay bridges, demolish obstacles. And our assessment? Complex, expensive, time-consuming to produce. The British are calling them funnies, modified Churchill tanks with various attachments, mine flails, petard mortars, fascine carriers. Will they work? Against land obstacles, yes. Against beach obstacles? Davidson shrugs. Unknown. They've never been tested under combat conditions against this type of defensive system. Lieutenant Colonel John T. Wan Eel, commander of the 112th Engineer Combat Battalion, speaks up. Sir, if I may, we've been looking at a simpler solution. Eisenhower turns. Go on. Bulldozers, sir. Sherman tanks fitted with bulldozer blades. They can push obstacles aside, drag them with cables, clear lanes through the belt, and they provide armor protection for the crew while doing it. Davidson frowns. The D7 armored bulldozer has been tested. It's vulnerable. Light armor. Exposed engine. Not suitable for assault operations. I'm not talking about D7s, O'Neill says. I'm talking about a tank dozer kit. Standard M4 Sherman with a bulldozer blade attachment. The tank retains its 75mm gun and full armor, but it can also function as a bulldozer. How many are available? We've placed Lend-Lease orders for 100 kits. Current arrival estimates suggest we'll have enough to equip some units before D-Day. Not all. Eisenhower considers this. The British solution, specialized armor, years in development, limited production. The American solution, bolt a bulldozer blade onto a standard tank. It's so simple it almost seems ridiculous. How long to clear an obstacle belt with hand methods? Eisenhower asks. Under ideal conditions. No enemy fire, low tide, unlimited time. A 16-man gap team can clear a 50-yard lane in approximately 45 minutes. Davidson replies. And under combat conditions? Unknown. Possibly impossible. And with a tank dozer? O'Neill pulls out his own calculations. A single tank dozer working continuously can clear a 50-yard lane in 15 to 20 minutes. It can push obstacles weighing up to 10 tons. It can drag multiple obstacles simultaneously using cables. And it can do all of this while under fire, protected by armor. The mathematics are compelling. 16 men exposed 45 minutes per lane. One tank dozer armored 15 minutes per lane. Eisenhower makes his decision. How many tank dozers can we allocate to Omaha? 16, sir. One per planned gap. The 741st and 743rd Tank Battalions will be equipped with 8 each. Make it happen. And send Davidson and O'Neill to Florida. Sir? The amphibious training base at Fort Pierce. They've been experimenting with underwater obstacle clearance since April 1943. I want them to see everything the Navy has learned. We have 4 months to figure this out. Yes, sir. Eisenhower looks back at the reconnaissance photos. Somewhere in those images on that beach in Normandy, American soldiers are going to die trying to clear those obstacles. How many depends on the decisions being made right now in this room. The German engineers have done their job brilliantly. The obstacles are a masterpiece of defensive engineering. Now it's a race. Can the Allies develop countermeasures fast enough? Can they train the men? Can they produce enough equipment? Or will Rommel's obstacle belt do exactly what it was designed to do? Stop the invasion at the waterline. 4 months to D-Day. The clock is running. March 1944. Slapton Sands, Devon, England. The beach here resembles Omaha. That's why the Allies chose it for Exercise Tiger, the full-scale rehearsal for the Normandy landings. Lieutenant John Klotz's 741st Tank Battalion stands beside his M4 Sherman tank and stares at the bulldozer blade mounted on the front. It looks absurd. The blade is a standard commercial bulldozer blade approximately 10 feet wide and 4 feet tall, made of heavy steel plate with a curved cutting edge. It's mounted on a framework that attaches to the tank's lower hull. Hydraulic rams, powered by the tank's engine, can raise or lower the blade. The whole assembly adds about 3,000 pounds to the tank's weight. Looks like we strapped a barn door to the front, says Sergeant William Beatson, Klotz gunner. That barn door can push 10 tons, Klotz replies. They're standing in a line with 5 other tank dozers from A Company. Behind them 10 more from the 743rd Tank Battalion. These 16 tanks represent the entire tank dozer allocation for Omaha Beach. 16 tanks, 16 bulldozer blades. To clear 7 500 yards of obstacle-infested beach, the math doesn't look good. An engineer captain approaches, Captain David from the 299th Engineer Combat Battalion. Hez carrying a clipboard and looking harassed. Lieutenant Klotz. We're ready for the demonstration. Show us what you've got. David leads them down the beach. The tide is out. In the exposed sand, the engineers have constructed replicas of German obstacles based on reconnaissance photos and intelligence reports. Belgian gates. Steel frameworks 10 feet tall. Czech hedgehogs. Crossed rails welded together. Wooden poles with dummy mines attached. Concrete tetrahedrons. Everything carefully positioned to match the spacing and layout observed at Omaha. Your mission, David explains, is to clear a 50-yard lane through this belt. The gaps need to be wide enough for landing craft to pass through, and for vehicles to drive up the beach. Klotz nods. Method? 2 options. 1. Push obstacles to the side with the blade. 2. Attach cables and drag them. We've got tow cables in the back stowage. Rules of engagement. Assume you're under fire from the moment you touch down. Assume the engineers are pinned down and can't assist. Assume it's just you. Klotz looks at the obstacle field. Then at his tank dozer. Let's find out what this thing can do. He climbs into the tank. Beatson takes his position in the turret. The rest of the crew, driver, co-driver, loader, settle into their stations. The M4 Sherman's engine roars to life. 500 horsepower. The tank weighs 35 tons with the dozer blade. The blade itself is down, scraping the sand. Klotz's voice crackles over the intercom. Driver, advance. Slow and steady, the tank rolls forward. The first obstacle is a Czech hedgehog. 6 steel rails crossed and welded, each rail about 6 inches in diameter. The hedgehog is partially buried in the sand, providing extra stability. The dozer blade hits it square on. For a moment, nothing happens. The tank's tracks spin, fighting for traction in the soft sand. Then, metal screaming against metal, the hedgehog starts to move. The tank pushes it 5 yards, 10 yards, 15 yards. Then the blade lifts and the hedgehog tumbles to the side. Klotz grins. 1 down. Next, a Belgian gate. This is heavier. 1,500 pounds of steel framework. The blade hits it and the tank actually slows down. The tracks dig deeper. The engine note changes, straining. But the gate moves. Slowly. Grudgingly. But it moves. The tank reverses. The cable goes taut. The Belgian gate scrapes across the sand, dragging behind the tank like a reluctant dog on a leash. Can we drag multiple obstacles? An engineer asks. Let's find out. They cable together 3 hedgehogs and a Belgian gate, approximately 4,000 pounds of steel. The tank backs up. The entire mass drags forward, leaving deep furrows in the sand. Jesus, someone mutters. Klotz runs the numbers in his head. 1 tank dozer can clear a 50-yard lane in 15 minutes by pushing. Or it can drag multiple obstacles simultaneously, clearing the same lane in perhaps 20 minutes but using less fuel and putting less strain on the transmission. The hydraulic blade can be raised to protect the crew when they're under fire, then lowered when they need to work. The tank retains its 75mm gun so it can engage bunkers and strongpoints while clearing obstacles. It's not elegant. It's not sophisticated. It's just brute force applied intelligently. But it works. What's the failure rate on the blade mounts? Klotz asks. We don't know, David admits. These kits were just developed. We don't have combat data. What about mine damage? If you hit a Teller mine with the blade down, the mine will probably detonate. The blast will damage the blade, possibly destroy the hydraulics. But the tank itself should survive. The blade acts as a shield. And if the blade fails, then you're a standard Sherman with a useless piece of steel strapped to the front. Klotz nods slowly. 16 tank dozers for Omaha. No redundancy. No spares. Each dozer assigned to a specific 50-yard gap in the obstacle belt. If they lose dozers in the landing, to mines, to German anti-tank guns, to mechanical failure, the gaps won't be cleared. If the gaps aren't cleared, the follow-on waves can't land. If the follow-on waves can't land, Omaha fails. The entire invasion, the largest amphibious assault in history, is going to depend in part on 16 bulldozers. Klotz looks at his tank dozer. The blade is scratched and dented from the exercise. The hydraulic lines glisten with fluid. The whole assembly looks temporary, jury-rigged, like something that might fall off at any moment. Well, make it work, he says. He has no idea that on D-Day only 6 of the 16 dozers will even reach the beach, or that only 2 will survive the first hour. June 5, 1944. Portland Harbor, England. Evening. Lieutenant John Klotz stands on the deck of LCT 535, watching the English coast recede in the fading light. The landing craft is crowded. 2 M4 Sherman gun tanks. His tank dozer. All 3 tanks are waterproofed. Exhausts, extended air intakes sealed, every hatch gasketed. They look like they're wearing snorkels. The channel is rough. 5-foot swells. The LCT pitches and rolls. Spray washes over the bow. Klotz's crew is below trying to stay warm. Sergeant William Beatson, Sergeant William Dietzen, Sergeant William Dom. 2 other crew members whose names won't make it into the after-action reports. 5 men. 1 tank dozer. Mission clear a 50-yard gap in the obstacle belt at Easy Red Sector Omaha Beach. Klotz has the mission details memorized. Touchdown at H10. Land on Easy Red between the E1 and E3 draws. Immediately engage German strongpoints WN-64 and WN-65 with main gun and machine guns. Then turn to obstacle clearance. Expected obstacles in their sector: 120 Belgian gates, 180 Czech hedgehogs, 250 mined poles, unknown number of tetrahedrons and ramps. Expected opposition: 88mm anti-tank gun in WN-61, 75mm guns in WN-64 and WN-64. Between the waterline and the seawall, 250 yards of beach. Then the shingle, a steep bank of smooth stones. Then the bluffs, 150-foot cliffs heavily mined, topped with German positions. The beach exits are narrow, heavily defended. The only way off the beach is through those exits, and the only way to those exits is through the obstacles. Klotz folds the map and puts it away. Sergeant Beatson climbs up from below carrying 2 canteen cups of coffee. He hands one to Klotz. "Heard the scuttlebutt?" Beatson asks. "Which scuttlebutt?" "DD tanks from C Company. They're supposed to launch from LCTs 6,000 yards out and swim to shore." Klotz shakes his head. "In this sea? They'll sink like stones." "That's what I said. But apparently the brass thinks it's a good idea." They stand in silence, drinking bad coffee, watching the convoy. Hundreds of ships, destroyers, cruisers, battleships, transport ships carrying infantry, LCTs carrying tanks, LCIs carrying engineers, minesweepers clearing lanes ahead of the fleet. The largest invasion force in human history. And somewhere in this mass of ships, 5 other LCTs carry the other tank dozers allocated to Omaha. 6 dozers from the 741st Tank Battalion, including Klotz. 8 from the 743rd, 16 dozers total. "You think this is going to work?" Beatson asks quietly. Klotz doesn't answer immediately. Hess thinking about the exercise at Slapton Sands. The way the tank dozer cleared obstacles so easily. The simple mechanical efficiency of it. Then Hez thinking about the reconnaissance photos. The sheer density of obstacles at Omaha. The mines. The German guns covering every foot of beach. "I think," Klotz says slowly, "that tomorrow is going to be the worst day of our lives. And I think we're going to do what we came here to do. Clear the obstacles. Clear the obstacles." Beatson nods. "You know the casualty estimates?" "I know. 40 to 80% first wave losses." "I know. We're first wave." "I know." They finish their coffee in silence. At 2200 hours, the announcement comes over the LCT's loudspeaker. "All personnel prepare for embarkation. H-WR is confirmed for Lai, D, A, May. Miskatesau. Mixaps. Wiskatesau. H, Isol. Ed, May, Noun Stown. Were. Mixaps, Mixaps, Mies, Mixaps, 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 Deflav, Mixaps, Carry. Torty. Kuteniides. Mizi. Wistair. Monka. Meebpak. Du. Line. Mixaps. Mixaps. Meetair. Mixaps. Meetair. Mixaps. Mixaps. Meetair. 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 Torty. Torty. Meetair. 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 Meetaps. Meetair. 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 Trying to hide it. But the fear. Mixaps. Butzai. Torti, Meteor, Torti, Torti, Meteor, 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 Torti, Meteor, 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 Meteor. Klotz runs topside. In the darkness he can see the silhouette of an LCT, maybe 500 yards away, settling lower in the water. Its bow is gone, blown off by a mine. That LCT was carrying tank dozers from A Company. 2 dozers lost, before the invasion even starts. 14 dozers left for Omaha. A5, 45 hours. June 6, 1944. The naval bombardment begins. USS Texas opens fire with her 14-inch guns. The shells scream overhead. You can hear them, a freight train roar, and explode on the beach. HMS Glasgow's 6-inch batteries join in. Then the destroyers USS Carmick, USS Doyle, USS Frankfurt. From LCT 535, 3 miles offshore, Lieutenant Klotz watches the beach erupt in fire. Good, he thinks. Blow those strongpoints to pieces. Make our job easier. The naval bombardment is supposed to last 35 minutes. In reality, it lasts 30. The Navy stops firing at VE 62226, Premial 62222, 10 minutes before HAR, to avoid hitting the incoming landing craft. 10 minutes of silence. 10 minutes for the German defenders to climb out of their bunkers, man their guns, and prepare. At 06:25, the LCT is doing maybe 8 knots, pitching in the heavy swells. 2 miles out he can see other landing craft. LCVPs carrying infantry. LCAs with British troops. More LCTs. And then he sees something that makes his stomach drop. DD tanks. Duplex drive tanks from C Company 741st Tank Battalion. They've been launched from their LCTs, 6,000 yards out, and they're supposed to swim to shore. In these seas, he watches as the first DD tank settles lower in the water. The canvas screens that provide flotation are being swamped by the waves. The tank is sinking, then let his stomach drop. DD tanks. Duplex drive tanks from C Company 31st Tank Battalion. They've been launched from their LCTs, 6,000 yards out, and they're supposed to swim to shore. In these seas, he watches as the first 27 DD tanks from C Company launched in heavy seas. Hell learned later that only 2 made it to shore. The rest sank, taking their crews with them. The 741st Tank Battalion just lost an entire company. 06, 30 hours. Hour. LCT 535 is 1 mile from shore. Klotz can see the beach clearly now. Through his binoculars he can see the obstacles. Hundreds of them. Thousands of them. Poles, and gates, and hedgehogs, dark shapes sticking up from the sand and surf. Beyond the obstacles, the beach, the seawall, the bluffs, and somewhere up there, the German guns. No explosions on the beach. No smoke. The naval bombardment hasn't destroyed anything. The strongpoints are intact. 06. 35 hours. Commence firing. Klotz shouts into the intercom. Sergeant Beatson in the gunner's position opens up with the 75mm gun. The tank rocks with the recoil. The shell screams down range. Klotz can actually see it, a dark streak against the gray sky, and explodes on the beach. They fire again and again, 40 rounds before they even land, shooting at German positions from 2,000 yards out. All around them, other tanks are firing. The noise is incredible. The LCT's 50 caliber machine guns hammer away. The 75mm guns boom. Spent shell casings clang on the steel deck. But the German guns are firing back now. Klotz sees a shell hit an LCVP 200 yards to their left. The landing craft disintegrates. There is no other word for it. One moment it's there carrying 35 men. The next moment it's driftwood and bodies in the water. Another shell hits the beach, throwing up a geyser of sand and water. Another hits an LCT punching through the bow ramp. The LCT veers off course, taking on water. Brace. The LCT Coxsacene shouts. Very, 100 yards from shore now. Klotz drops down into the turret, slamming the hatch shut. Through his periscope he can see obstacles dead ahead. Belgian gates. Poles with mines. Hedgehogs. 50 yards. The LCT hits something. Probably a hedgehog. And there's a grinding crash. The water is shallower here, maybe 4 feet deep. Klotz can see infantry in the water, men from earlier waves struggling through the surf. Some of them aren't moving. The LCT's engines roar in reverse, killing forward momentum. The bow ramp drops with a crash. Go. 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 Klotz's tank dozer rolls forward, blade down, splashing into the surf. They've landed on easy red, exactly where they're supposed to be. And the beach is hell. Lore 6. 40 hours. Easy red sector. Klotz's tank dozer grinds through the surf water up to the tracks. The blade is down, acting as a plow, shoving aside smaller obstacles. Wooden poles that snap like toothpicks. Through his periscope, Klotz can see the beach. Bodies. Dozens of bodies. Men from the first wave, the 16th Infantry Regiment, cut down crossing the beach or sheltering behind obstacles. Disabled tanks. He counts 5 M4 Shermans stopped in the surf or on the sand. Some are burning. Some are just sitting there. Tracks blown off by mines. Wrecked landing craft. LCVPs hung up on Belgian gates. LCMs holed by hedgehogs, their ramps down, soldiers dead or dying in the water. And obstacles. Everywhere. The reconnaissance photos didn't capture the sheer density of them. The way they overlap and interlock. The way every gap between obstacles is covered by German machine gun fire. Target, Beatson shouts. Pillbox 11 o'clock. Klotz sees it. WN-64, a concrete bunker on the bluff. Muzzle flashes from the firing slit. Fire. The 75mm gun booms. The shell hits below the firing slit, chipping concrete but not penetrating. They fire again and again. At 2,000 yards from shore we began firing, expending about 50 rounds, Beatson will later report. Landed on beach at approximately 0630 hours, continued firing at definite targets, approximately 10 both large gun and machine gun emplacements, using about 90 rounds HEMM. It is reasonably sure that hits were scored. But scoring hits and destroying strongpoints are different things. The German bunkers are 6 feet of reinforced concrete. The 75mm shells chip and scar the concrete, but they don't penetrate. The German guns keep firing. To their right, 100 yards down the beach, Klotz sees another tank dozer from A Company. Then he sees an 88mm shell hit it square on the turret. The tank dozer explodes. The turret flips off like a coin. The hull burns, ammunition cooking off inside. 13 dozers left. During this time, Beatson will report we were also engaged in the removal of beach obstacles. That's a remarkable understatement, because what Klotz and his crew are about to do, what they will do for the next several hours, is work under fire. Direct fire, machine guns, mortars, artillery, while men are dying all around them, while the beach turns into a killing ground, and they're going to clear obstacles. Klotz maneuvers the tank toward the nearest Belgian gate. It's 10 feet tall, partially submerged with what looks like an artillery shell wired to the top. Blade down. Advance slow. The tank dozer hits the gate. The impact shudders through the entire vehicle. The gate doesn't budge. More power. The driver revs the engine. The tracks dig into the sand. The tank is straining 500 horsepower fighting 500 pounds of steel planted in sand. The gate starts to move, inch by inch. The sand around the base breaks loose. The gate tilts. Then it slides, scraping across obstacles behind it. The tank pushes it 20 yards. 30 yards. Gets it clear of the lane. Beatson swings the turret, scanning for targets. Multiple infantry behind that next hedgehog cluster. There he pinned down. Klotz sees them, maybe a dozen soldiers from the 16th Infantry taking cover behind 3 Czech hedgehogs. They can't move forward. The Germans have them zeroed in. We're going through. The dozer blade hits the first hedgehog. Steel rails screech against the blade. The hedgehog flips, rolls, comes to rest on its side. The infantry see what Klotz is doing and follow behind the tank, using it as a shield. Second hedgehog. This one has a mine attached. Klotz sees the teller mine, a flat disc about 12 inches across, but there's no time to defuse it. Brace. The blade hits the hedgehog. The hedgehog shifts. The mine detonates. Dwam! The blast is incredible inside the tank, like being inside a bell when it's struck. Klotz ears ring. Smoke fills the crew compartment. Damage report. Blade hydraulics compromised. The driver shouts. Losing pressure. Fluid is streaming from the hydraulic lines. The blade sags, partially lowered, but no longer under full control. They can still push with it, but they can't raise it for protection. And if the lines fail completely, the blade becomes useless. Keep going. They push through 2 more hedgehogs, shoving them aside. The lane is maybe 10 yards wide now. Not enough, but it's something. 06:45 hours. More landing craft coming in. LCVPs and LCMs carrying the second wave. They're heading straight for the obstacle belt. One LCVP hits a mined pole. The mine detonates. The front half of the boat simply ceases to exist. The rear half sinks in 30 seconds. Another LCVP tries to weave through the obstacles. It makes it 50 yards. Then its hull catches on a hedgehog and rips open. Water floods in. The boat settles, men jumping into the surf. An LCM, the bigger landing craft carrying engineers and equipment, drives onto a Belgian gate. The gate doesn't give way. The LCM's bow rides up on the gate, and the craft tilts at a 45-degree angle, stuck. German mortars find the range. The LCM takes 3 hits. The engineers try to abandon ship, but they're in deep water now, overloaded with equipment. Klotz watches men drown. He forces himself to look away, focus on the mission. Clear obstacles, cable time, he orders. Sergeant Daum and another crew member exit through the escape hatch in the floor. It's the only way out without exposing themselves to German fire by opening the top hatches. They crawl out under the tank, then run to the rear. They're in the open now. Machine gun fire kicks up sand around their feet. They pull the tow cables from the rear stowage. Each cable weighs 60 pounds, and run toward a cluster of obstacles. A Belgian gate and 2 hedgehogs close together. Daum loops the cable through the Belgian gate's framework, while the other crew member attaches it to a hedgehog. They work fast, hands shaking. Bullets crack overhead. They sprint back to the tank and hook the cables to the tow shackles. Cables secure. They scramble back underneath the tank and climb through the escape hatch. Back up. Slow. The tank reverses. The cables go taut. For a moment nothing happens. 3,000 pounds of obstacles resisting. Then, they start to drag. The Belgian gate scrapes across the sand, the hedgehogs tumbling behind it. The tank pulls them 30 yards up the beach clear of the lane. It works. The method works. But it's brutally slow. And every minute they work, more landing craft are hitting obstacles, more men are dying in the water. 06:55 hours. Klotz spots the other operational tank dozer from A Company, about 50 yards to the east. It's pushing obstacles, blade fully functional. Good. 2 dozers working, 2 lanes opening. Then he sees a German 88mm gun, probably from WN61. Fire. The shell hits the other dozer's blade dead center. The blade doesn't stop the shell. It punches through into the hull. The tank dozer explodes. 12 dozers left. On the entire beach. No. Klotz sees another dozer to the west stopped. Its blade is on the ground, detached from the tank. A mine must have blown off the mounting brackets. That dozer is useless. 11 dozers left. Klotz doesn't know it yet, but of the 6 tank dozers from the 741st Tank Battalion that landed, his is now one of only 2 still operational. The other 4 are destroyed or disabled. And of the 8 dozers from the 743rd Tank Battalion landing on the western sector of Omaha, the story is similar. Mines. German anti-tank guns. Mechanical failures. By 0700 hours most of them will be out of action. But Klotz doesn't know any of this. He just knows that his dozer is still working. The blade is damaged but functional. And there are still hundreds of obstacles to clear. Next target, he says. 0700 hours. The tide is coming in. This is the nightmare scenario the planners feared. The obstacles that were visible at low tide are now submerged. Landing craft can't see them until they hit them. An LCT tries to beach. It's carrying trucks and artillery. The coxswain can't see the hedgehogs under the water. The LCT runs onto 3 of them simultaneously. The hedgehogs punch through the hull in multiple places. The LCT starts taking on water. The bow ramp drops anyway, and the vehicles try to drive off. The first truck drives straight into deep water. The tide has covered the sandbars. And sinks. The crew drowns before they can get out. Another LCT hits a submerged Belgian gate. The gate tears a 10-foot gash in the hull. The LCT's engines flood. It settles in 15 feet of water, blocking any craft behind it from landing. The obstacle belt is doing exactly what Rommel designed it to do. It's destroying the invasion. Klotz keeps working. Push a hedgehog clear. Cable 2 more and drag them. Push aside a wooden ramp. Nudge a tetrahedron out of the lane. The work is methodical. Mechanical. There is no thought anymore, just action. See obstacle, push obstacle. See obstacle, cable obstacle, drag obstacle. Beatson keeps the 75mm gun working, firing at any German position that reveals itself. They're down to 20 rounds of ammunition. Then 10. Then 5. At 0800 more landing craft approach with ammunition resupply. But they can't get through the obstacles. One LCM tries. It hits a mine. The LCM is carrying artillery shells and explosives for the engineers. The explosion is massive. A fireball, 100 feet tall. The shockwave rocks Klotz's tank. When the smoke clears, there's nothing left. No LCM, no supplies, no crew. 0900 hours. Klotz has been working for over 2 hours. The lane they've cleared is maybe 50 yards wide now. Barely enough for 2 LCTs to beach side by side. But it's a gap, and gaps mean landing craft can get through. And landing craft getting through means men and equipment on the beach. To the west, Klotz can see the other surviving dozer from A Company still working. That crew has cleared another partial lane. 2 dozers, 2 partial lanes. On a beach that was supposed to have 16 lanes cleared by now. The mathematics of the invasion are collapsing. But the invasion isn't stopping. More craft keep coming. Destroyers are moving closer to shore, risking running aground so they can provide direct fire support. Bangalore torpedoes are blowing gaps in the barbed wire on the bluffs. Small groups of infantry are finding ways up the cliffs, flanking the German strongpoints. The battle is slowly, agonizingly turning. But the obstacle belt still holds. And Klotz's tank dozer keeps working. 12:00 hours. Lieutenant John Klotz is dead. It happened at noon. The tank dozer had stopped to reload ammunition from an LCT that finally made it through the obstacles. Klotz climbed out to coordinate with the naval beach party, to let them know which lanes were clear, and which weren't. A German machine gun, probably from WN-65, caught him in the open. Sergeant William Beatson, the gunner, is now in command. At about noon we reloaded with AM. In order to continue our work, Beatson will report. At this time Lieutenant Klotz became casualty due to enemy fire. The remainder of the crew continued the work of clearing the beach. Continue the work. Carrying the beach. That's it. That's all. Lieutenant dead. Keep working. Beatson doesn't have time to grieve. Doesn't have time to think about the fact that he just watched his commanding officer die. Doesn't have time for any of it. Because there are still obstacles to clear. And the tide is at its highest now. The obstacles are completely submerged. Landing craft are coming in blind, hoping the gaps are wide enough, hoping they don't hit anything. Some make it. Most don't. Beatson maneuvers the tank dozer back into the surf. The water is up to the turret ring now. The driver is navigating by periscope, can barely see where they're going. Obstacle ahead. Looks like a Belgian gate. Push it. The blade is barely functional now. The hydraulics are shot fluid leaking everywhere. The blade is stuck in a half-lowered position, but it can still push. The tank hits the gate. The impact is softer this time. The water cushions it. But the gate still moves, scraping along the sandy bottom, pushed by 35 tons of steel. They shove it. 20 yards. 30 yards. Get it clear. Another gate. Push it. A cluster of hedgehogs. Cable them. Drag them. The work continues. It was necessary for the crew to dismount under fire, to facilitate the removal of obstacles which were dragged by means of cables. Dismount under fire. Read that again. Under fire. Crew members. Beatson can't remember their names later. The after-action report doesn't record them. Climbing out of the tank, running through machine gun fire, attaching cables to obstacles, running back. Again and again. One crew member takes a bullet in the shoulder. He keeps working. They bandage him inside the tank, then he goes back out for the next cable run. From time to time the crew assisted in the evacuation of wounded to the landing boats, also while under fire. Between clearing obstacles they're running wounded men down to the water's edge. Soldiers too shot up to walk. Dragging them across the beach through the surf, getting them onto landing craft heading back to the ships. This isn't what tank crews are supposed to do. This isn't what anyone is supposed to do. But it's what needs to be done. 13:30 hours. In the early afternoon, Sergeant Daum became a casualty due to enemy fire. Sergeant William Daum, the crew member who ran cables in the morning, who attached tow hooks under fire, who kept working despite the nightmare around him. Dead. 2 crew members gone now. Klotz and Daum. Beatson doesn't stop. Can't stop. The remainder of the crew continued operating the tank dozer, clearing the beach of obstacles and the removal of wrecked and burning vehicles in order to expedite the movement of traffic. Clearing obstacles has expanded to include clearing wreckage, disabled tanks, burned out trucks, the hulk of an LCT that took an 88mm shell and is now just blocking traffic. The dozer blade, damaged hydraulics failed stuck at half height, pushes it all aside. They work until 1400 hours. This work was continued until the tide rendered further operations impossible. The tide, the same tide that submerged the obstacles making them invisible death traps, has now risen so high that the tank can't operate in it. Water is getting into the engine compartment. The electrical systems are shorting. They have to withdraw to higher ground or risk drowning the engine completely. Beatson backs the tank up the beach out of the surf onto the shingle. He climbs out and looks back at what they've done. The lane isn't pretty. It's not the neat 50-yard corridor they practiced clearing in England. It's a rough, winding path through the obstacle belt, maybe 30 yards wide in some places, 60 in others. Obstacles have been pushed aside, not removed. They're piled up on either side of the lane like snowbanks after a plow passes through. But it's a lane, and LCTs are using it. Vehicles are streaming through. Tanks, half-tracks, artillery pieces, trucks carrying ammunition and supplies. The beach is still a nightmare. Bodies everywhere, wrecked equipment, fires burning. But it's not the stalemate it was at 0700 hours. Beatson looks east toward the other surviving tank dozer from A Company. It's still working. 2 dozers. 2 lanes. That's it. That's what Omaha Beach has to show for the elaborate plan to have 16 dozers clearing 16 gaps. But it's enough. Just barely it's enough. Later, much later, when the after-action reports are compiled, and the analysts try to understand how Omaha succeeded despite the catastrophic losses, they'll note this detail. The remaining 2, with the help of the gapping teams, managed to enlarge the 4 partial lanes into a single large gap nearly 600 yards wide later in the morning. 600 yards. On a beach 500 yards wide, 8 of the beach frontage. But that 8, that narrow corridor cleared by 2 damaged bulldozers and the gapping teams working under fire, is what allowed the follow-on forces to land. The 18th Infantry Regiment, the artillery battalions, the engineers, the vehicles and supplies that transformed Omaha from a killing ground into a beachhead. 2 bulldozers changed D-Day. 10:30 hours. Fox Red Sector. The landing of the 2nd Battalion 18th Infantry Regiment marks the beginning of the end for the German defense at Omaha. They land in LCVP's 10 boats carrying approximately 800 men. The boats come through one of the gaps cleared by the tank dozers. Not Klotz Gap, but the one to the east cleared by the other surviving dozer from A Company. The infantry wades ashore. They're under fire immediately. WN-60 and WN-65 are still active, still pouring machine gun fire onto the beach. But the 2nd Battalion is landing intact as units not scattered like the first wave. And they have support. 2 tanks from the 741st Tank Battalion positioned on the shingle are hammering WN-65 with 75mm fire. Half-tracks from the 467th Anti-Aircraft Battalion. They landed through the cleared gap, are using their quad 50 caliber machine guns to suppress German positions. And offshore close enough that you could almost hit it with a thrown stone, USS Frankfurt is firing her 5-inch guns directly at the German bunkers. The destroyer is so close, Shez risking running aground. But Shez providing fire support that the cruisers and battleships farther out can't match. Precision fire at point-blank range. The 2nd Battalion moves up the beach, crosses the shingle, reaches the base of the bluffs. Bangalore torpedoes blow gaps in the wire. Infantry starts climbing. By noon, exit E1, the St. Laurent draw. The gap between WN-64 and WN-65 is open. Vehicles start moving inland. Jeeps, trucks. Artillery prime movers towing 105mm howitzers. More tanks. The German defense is crumbling. Not because the strong points have been destroyed. Most of them are still intact. But because they're being flanked. Small groups of infantry have found paths up the bluffs, have gotten behind the German positions. The bunkers that were impregnable from the front are vulnerable from behind. WN-62 falls at approximately 11:00 hours. The German defenders, most of them exhausted, out of ammunition, cut off from any hope of reinforcement, surrender. WN-60 falls shortly after. WN-61 is bypassed, isolated, no longer a threat. By 14:00 hours, the beach is no longer under direct fire. German artillery from inland positions is still dropping shells, but the killing zone that existed at H-hour is gone. And through it, all vehicles keep streaming through the gaps cleared by the tank dozers. By evening, the tally tells the story: 34,000 men ashore at Omaha Beach. 3,000 vehicles landed. Casualties are horrific. Worse than any other beach except Omaha's western sector, where the 29th Infantry Division faced similarly determined resistance. But the beachhead is secured. The invasion at Omaha succeeded. By the narrowest of margins, with catastrophic losses against all odds, it succeeded. And a significant part of that success, a part that will be overshadowed in the histories by the heroic infantry assaults and the destroyer fire support, is the work of 2 bulldozers, 2 M4 Sherman tanks with bulldozer blades attached. Operated by men who kept working despite watching their officers die, despite losing crew members, despite being under constant fire for hours. Men whose names won't appear in most history books. Sergeant William Beatson, who took command when Lieutenant Klotz was killed, and kept the dozer working until the tide forced them to stop. The crew members whose names don't appear in the after-action reports, who dismounted under fire to attach cables, who dragged wounded soldiers to evacuation boats, who kept the dozer operational through skill and sheer determination. And Lieutenant John Klotz and Sergeant William Daum, who died clearing obstacles on Easy Red. 2 bulldozers, 600 yards of beach, 34,000 men, the mathematics of D-Day. And 6:30 hours. June 6, 1944. Utah Beach, 400 yards south of where they're supposed to be. The 8th Infantry Regiment, 4th Infantry Division wades ashore at Uncle Red and Tear Green beaches, except these aren't Uncle Red and Tear Green. Through a series of navigational errors and strong currents, the entire assault force has landed at the wrong beach. Lieutenant Colonel James Van Fleet, watching from an LCVP offshore, immediately realizes the mistake. The landmarks don't match the maps. The German strongpoints aren't where they should be. But Brigadier General Theodore Roosevelt Jr., the 56-year-old assistant division commander who insisted on landing with the first wave despite a bad heart, makes a decision that will become legendary. "Well, start the war from right here," he says. And they do. The lucky accident at Utah will save thousands of lives. Instead of facing WN-8 and Strong Point 9, heavily fortified positions with multiple bunkers, extensive minefields, and interlocking fields of fire, the assault forces face WN-5. WN-5 is commanded by Lieutenant Arthur Jonka, a decorated veteran of the Russian campaign. But his position is nowhere near as strong as the defenses farther north. The concrete casemate houses a 50mm gun, not an 88. The Tobruks have machine guns and a French 37mm gun from a Renault FT-17 tank. The anti-tank gun is a 47mm, not the heavier pieces emplaced at stronger positions. More importantly, WN-5 has just been hammered by accurate bombing from the U.S. 9th Air Force. Unlike Omaha, where the heavy bombers of the 8th Air Force dropped their loads too far inland due to cloud cover, the medium bombers at Utah flew low and hit their targets. The beach is cratered. Many of the German defensive positions are buried or damaged. Jonka's men are shell-shocked, disoriented, their communications cut. But the obstacles are still there. 2 400 wooden poles with teller mines, then 350 Czech hedgehogs, 150 tetrahedrons, various ramps and stakes, 0.41 obstacles per yard, slightly less dense than Omaha but still formidable. The difference: the tank dozers at Utah have time and space to work. C Company 70th Tank Battalion lands at 0645 hours with 4 M4 tank dozers. 2 more dozers were lost when an LCT capsized during the crossing, and another hit a mine, but 4 is enough. The beach at Utah is shallower, wider. The tidal flat extends 1,700 yards, more than a mile, from the high water mark to where the landing craft beach. That gives the dozers time. Staff Sergeant Leonard Lomel, watching from a ranger boat offshore, will later describe what he sees. The tank dozers went to work like farm tractors. They just started pushing obstacles aside, piling them up in rows. The method is the same as at Omaha. Push with the blade or cable and drag. But at Utah the crews aren't working under the same murderous fire. The German defenders are suppressed by the airstrikes and naval bombardment. The strongpoints that are still active are focused on the infantry, not the dozers. And the obstacles themselves are lighter. More wooden poles, fewer Belgian gates. Easier to move. The dozers work quickly. First dozer clears a path straight up the beach, pushing poles aside like dominoes. The poles have mines, but when a pole tips over, the mine usually doesn't detonate. They're triggered by impact from above, not from tipping. Second dozer uses cables. The crew attaches cables to multiple hedgehogs, 3, 4, sometimes 5 at once, and drags them like a train of freight cars. The hedgehogs tumble and roll, clearing 50 yards at a time. Third dozer focuses on the tetrahedrons, shoving them to the side of the lane. The blade scrapes concrete against sand, but the obstacles move. Fourth dozer clears wreckage. 1 LCM hit a mine and sank at the waterline. The dozer pushes it aside so following craft can pass. By 0800 hours, 90 minutes after H-hour, the 1st Engineer Special Brigade reports. The gapping teams had fired their first set of charges, and in some cases second or even third sets, and the entire beach in the assault area was clear of obstacles. The entire beach. Read that again: the entire beach. Not partial lanes, not narrow gaps. The entire assault area, hundreds of yards wide, is clear. Contrast this with Omaha, where at my impenetrable hours the beach is still a killing ground with only 2 operational dozers. The success at Utah isn't just about the lighter defenses or the accurate bombing. It's about the bulldozers having the time and space to do their job. And the crews use that time efficiently. One dozer crew discovers that the wooden poles are planted in regular rows, all at the same angle. They realize they can clear an entire row by pushing the first pole. It falls into the second pole, which falls into the third, domino effect. 20 poles cleared in 5 minutes. Another crew cables hedgehogs together and creates a daisy chain. 7 hedgehogs linked by a single cable. The tank drags the whole mass up the beach in one pull. It's almost elegant. The simplicity of the solution matched to the problem. By 10:00 hours, the landings at Utah can be generally described as a success. Casualties: 107 total for the entire Utah assault force. That's not just the tank battalions. That's infantry, engineers, Navy personnel, everyone. Compare that to Omaha, over 2,000 casualties. Part of the difference is the weaker German defenses. Part is the accurate air support. Part is the lucky accident of landing in the wrong place. But a significant part is the bulldozers. 4 tank dozers working efficiently in favorable conditions cleared a beach in 90 minutes. At Omaha, 2 tank dozers working desperately in the worst possible conditions cleared narrow lanes over several hours. Same equipment, same training. Vastly different results. The lesson: the bulldozer solution works. But it requires time, space, and crews that can work without being immediately destroyed. Utah provided those conditions. Omaha barely did. And that difference, measured in minutes and yards, determined who lived and who died on D-Day. Let's return to December 1943. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel standing knee-deep in freezing water sketching obstacle patterns. When they come, he says they will come at high tide. Hes right about that. We're going to make that impossible. Hes almost right about that too. Rommel's obstacle belt is a masterpiece of defensive engineering. Every principle of military engineering circa die des Liv. 1943. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel standing knee-deep in freezing water sketching obstacle patterns. When they come, he says they will come at high tide. Hes right about that. We're going to make that impossible. Hes almost right about that too. Rommel's obstacle belt. Obstacles in depth. 6 lines from low tide to high tide mark ensuring that landing craft face obstacles regardless of tidal state. Obstacles in combination. Ramps to capsize boats, poles to hole hulls, gates to block, mines to destroy. Each type addresses a different threat, creates a different problem for the attacker to solve. Obstacles under fire. The obstacle belt is positioned within range of German strongpoints. WN 60 through WN 65 at Omaha can cover every foot of the beach. Obstacles alone won't stop an invasion. They have to be defended. Mathematical density. 0.49 obstacles per yard at Omaha. That's 1 obstacle every 2 yards. Statistically, it's almost impossible for a landing craft to avoid them all. Psychological effect. The obstacles are visible at low tide, creating a sense of impenetrability. At high tide, they're submerged, creating fear of the unseen. Either way, they affect morale. By all military engineering standards of the era, Rommel's design is brilliant. And it works. At Omaha, in the first 2 hours of the invasion, the obstacles do exactly what they're designed to do. LCVPs hit mined poles and sink. The mines work. LCMs hang up on Belgian gates and can't retract. The gates work. LCTS try to beach and impale themselves on hedgehogs. The hedgehogs work. Craft that avoid the large obstacles ground on the smaller ones, tetrahedrons, nutcrackers, and sustain damage. The smaller obstacles work. The casualties among the landing craft are catastrophic. Exact numbers are impossible to determine. The after-action reports are incomplete. Many craft were damaged but not destroyed. But conservative estimates suggest 40 to 50 losses among first-wave craft. The obstacles are succeeding. So why does the invasion succeed anyway? Because Rommel and his engineers made one crucial miscalculation. They assumed time. The obstacle belt is designed to stop landing craft. It succeeds at that. But the design assumes that stopped landing craft equals stopped invasion. It doesn't account for determination. Engineer teams working under fire to clear obstacles, accepting horrific casualties to blow gaps. Improvisation. Tank dozers pushing obstacles that hand teams can't move. Crews cabling multiple obstacles and dragging them as mass. Sacrifice. Men like Lieutenant Klotz and Sergeant Daum who keep working until they're killed. Crews who dismount under fire because it's the only way to attach cables. Infantry who use wrecked landing craft as cover to reach the shore. Volume. The Allies don't stop sending craft. Even with 40 losses, 60 get through. More waves keep coming. More men. More vehicles. More supplies. The assault isn't a single wave. It's a flood. Mobility. Once even narrow gaps are cleared, vehicles can land. And vehicles, especially tanks, can flank the strong points that protect the obstacles. The German defensive scheme depends on the obstacles buying time for the strong points to work. But if tanks get inland, the strong points become isolated. The bulldozer is the key that breaks this equation. One M4 tank dozer can do the work of 50 engineers. It can push obstacles that weigh a ton. It can drag multiple obstacles simultaneously. It can work continuously. No need for rotation, no need for brakes. And most importantly, it can work under fire protected by armor. The German engineers didn't account for this because bulldozers aren't a weapon. They're a tool, a piece of engineering equipment that don't fit into military categories. Not artillery, not armor, not infantry. But on D-Day, bulldozers become the most important weapon on the beach. Not the most powerful. Not the most sophisticated. The most important. Because without them, the narrow gaps cleared by the engineers working under fire don't widen. Without widened gaps, follow-on waves can't land efficiently. Without follow-on waves, the assault stalls. Without momentum, the German defenders have time to reinforce, time to counterattack. The bulldozers provide momentum. But I.D.T. do nas. Malak left. Rommel's obstacles were brilliant, but because the simple engineering was adaptable. The no-most doesn't matter in war. 2 bulldozers. Damaged crews depleted operating on sheer determination, cleared enough beach to tip the balance. Simple engineering defeated complex engineering. Not because the complex engineering was flawed. Rommel's obstacles were brilliant, but because the simple engineering was adaptable. The tank dozer could push, could pull, could keep working even when damaged. It could be operated by men who wouldn't stop. And in the end, that made all the difference. The after-action reports are cold documents. At 2,000 yards from shore we began firing. Lieutenant Klotz became casualty due to enemy fire. The remainder of the crew continued operating the tank dozer. The reports don't tell you what it was like, what it smelled like. Cordite, and burning fuel, and something worse. What it sounded like. The constant hammer of machine guns, the scream of artillerymen screaming. What it felt like to keep working while your commanding officer bleeds out on the beach. The reports don't tell you the names of all the crew members. The 741st Tank Battalion's after-action report lists Lieutenant John Klotz and Sergeant William Daum as killed in action. It mentions Sergeant William Beatson taking command. But the other crew members? Anonymous. The remainder of the crew, the report says. They deserve names. But history didn't record them. What history did record: 741st Tank Battalion A Company, 2 tanks and 1 tank dozer lost when LCT hit mine before landing, 2 tanks and 1 tank dozer unable to land, 1 tank dozer blade blown off by mine. 2 tank dozers lost to unknown causes. 2 tank dozers survived and operated through D-Day. Human cost: A Company, 741st Tank Battalion, 1 officer killed, 1 sergeant killed, additional crew wounded, 1 officer, and 16 enlisted men missing, presumed drowned. 741st Tank Battalion. Overall, D-Day losses: 30 tanks lost at sea or destroyed on beach. Only 5 tanks operational by end of D-Day. 4 of 6 tank dozers lost. But those 2 surviving dozers cleared the gaps that mattered. The gapping teams, the engineers and Navy combat demolition units, assigned to clear obstacles by hand, suffered even worse. Special Engineer Task Force, Omaha Beach Team 14. First to land 06. 25 hours on Easy Red. Shell hit their rubber raft, loaded with explosives. 3 Navy personnel killed, 4 missing, and presumed dead. Unable to set charges due to infantry taking cover behind obstacles. Team 13, LCM, hit by artillery during unloading. Heavy casualties. Most explosive packs, soaked and useless. Infantry prevented charges from being detonated. Team 12, successfully wired their sector. Attempted to retreat to safety before detonation. Shell hit the primacord, setting off charges prematurely. 6 Army engineers killed, 2 wounded. 4 Navy personnel killed, 2 wounded. Unknown number of infantry killed or wounded in the blast. Team 11 landed under heavy fire, worked for 15 minutes, setting charges. Detonated successfully, clearing partial gap. Team leader killed. 60 casualties. Gapping support Team F. LCM hit by German fire at 0700 eyes. Sank immediately. Only 4 of the team members made it to shore alive. The pattern repeats across all 16 GAP teams assigned to Omaha, 40 to 60 casualties in the first hour. Some teams lost everyone. Some accomplished their mission despite the losses. Some never got the chance. By the end of D-Day, the Special Engineer Task Force had suffered over 40 casualties overall. One of the highest casualty rates of any unit on Omaha Beach. These men, engineers and sailors, not infantry, went into the water carrying explosives, working in the open, completely exposed to German fire. They set charges on mined obstacles. Lieutenant Bernard Karnick, 299th Engineer Combat Battalion, survived D-Day. His account recorded weeks later. The obstacles were worse than we expected. Heavier. More of them. The mines were real. We thought some might be dummies. They weren't. The fire was constant. You couldn't think. You just moved to the next obstacle, set the charge, moved to the next one. When the firing started, you didn't know if it was your charges or German guns. Men just disappeared. He pauses in the recording. We were supposed to clear 16 gaps. 50 yards each. 800 yards total. We cleared maybe half that. The tank dozers did the rest. Without them we wouldn't have made it. The tank dozers. Everyone who survived Omaha mentions them. The after-action reports. The personal accounts. The official histories. The remaining 2, with the help of the gapping teams, managed to enlarge the 4 partial lanes into a single large gap nearly 600 yards wide. 600 yards cleared. Out of 500 yards of beach. 34,000 men landed through those 600 yards. In the Normandy American Cemetery above Omaha Beach, there are 387 graves. Not all from D-Day. The cemetery holds casualties from the entire Normandy campaign. But approximately 2,000 of those graves are from June 6, 1944. 2,000 graves. And no one knows how many more would be there if those 2 bulldozers hadn't kept working. One grave marker reads John Klotz, 1st Lieutenant, 741st Tank BN, New York. June 6, 1944. No mention that he was commanding a tank dozer. No mention that he spent the morning clearing obstacles under fire. No mention that his death occurred while coordinating with beach parties to mark the cleared lanes. Just the name. The rank. The unit. The date. Another marker. William Dom, Sergeant, 741st Tank BN, New York. June 6, 1944. No mention that he was commanding a tank dozer. No mention that he spent the morning clearing obstacles under fire. No mention that his death occurred while coordinating with beach parties to mark the cleared lanes. Just the name. The men who survived, Sergeant William Beatson and the other crew members, went home after the war. Beatson never gave interviews, never spoke publicly about D-Day. The service records show he received the Silver Star for actions on June 6, 1944, but the citation is brief: clinical. For gallantry in action, Andard language, standard format. Doesn't capture what it was like to take command when your lieutenant died. To keep a damaged tank dozer operational for hours. To dismount under fire again and again to attach cables. To watch your sergeant die and keep working anyway. The medal citation says he cleared obstacles under intense enemy fire. Intense enemy fire. That's a euphemism. The reports from Omaha describe machine gun fire so heavy it was like hail. Artillery so accurate the Germans were using pre-registered firing points. Mortars dropping so frequently there was barely a gap between explosions. Intense enemy fire doesn't capture it. But that's what the citation says. And that's all history records. The 743rd Tank Battalion landing on the western sector of Omaha has a similar story. Better results initially. C Company landed intact with 16 tanks on Dog White and Easy Green. Only one tank lost in the landing. B Company on Dog Green faced worse odds. Heavy fire from WN-70 and WN-72, multiple tanks disabled. By day's end, 37 operational M4 tanks. Only one tank dozer still working from the 8 allocated to 743rd. Casualties: 2 officers killed, 3 officers wounded, 58 enlisted men missing, numerous wounded. The math is brutal. 16 tank dozers allocated to Omaha, 4 lost before landing, 8 destroyed or disabled within first 2 hours. 4 survived, but with varying degrees of damage. 2 worked continuously through D-Day. 2 dozers, 2 crews. Against those numbers you can measure the human cost. 2 officers killed. Unknown number of crew killed or wounded. Multiple citations for valor, most never publicized. Men who did a job that wasn't glorious, wasn't celebrated, but was absolutely essential. They weren't infantry storming bunkers. They weren't rangers scaling cliffs. They weren't paratroopers dropping behind enemy lines. They were bulldozer operators, and they saved D-Day. August 1946, London. Major General John D. Inglis, Chief Engineer of the 21st Army Group, publishes his official report on the D-Day obstacles. Inglis' report is comprehensive, 172 pages of analysis, diagrams, statistics, and conclusions. It's the definitive engineering assessment of what worked and what didn't on June 6, 1944. On the German obstacles, Inglis is blunt. The German beach obstacle program represented a significant achievement in military engineering. The obstacles were well designed, appropriately positioned, and constructed with materials that maximized their defensive effectiveness. The density of emplacement at certain beaches, particularly Omaha, was sufficient to threaten the success of the entire assault. Translation: Rommel's engineers did their job brilliantly on the Allied countermeasures. The specialized armor developed by the 79th Armored Division proved highly effective on Commonwealth beaches. The mine-clearing flails, bridging vehicles, and demolition tanks fulfilled their design purposes and significantly reduced casualties. However, these specialized vehicles required extensive training and were available in limited numbers. Translation: The British funnies worked but were complex and scarce. On the American approach, the use of tank dozers, standard M4 Sherman tanks fitted with bulldozer blade attachments, proved remarkably effective despite initial skepticism. The tank dozer combined the armor protection and firepower of a gun tank with the obstacle-clearing capability of a bulldozer. While less sophisticated than purpose-built specialized armor, the tank dozer's simplicity and versatility made it invaluable in the assault phase. Translation: The simple solution worked better than expected. But then Inglis includes a section that reveals the real story. Analysis of obstacle clearance at Omaha Beach presents a sobering picture. Of the 16 tank dozers allocated, only 2 remained operational after the first 2 hours. These 2 vehicles, working in conjunction with surviving engineer teams, cleared approximately 600 yards of beach frontage, less than 10 of the total beach width. However, this clearance was sufficient to permit the landing of follow-on forces which ultimately secured the beachhead. He continues: The near failure at Omaha Beach must be attributed to multiple factors: stronger than anticipated German defenses, less effective naval and air bombardment than planned, rough seas that sank or delayed numerous craft, and, critically, the loss of most obstacle-clearing assets in the first hour of the assault. The success of the operation depended upon a narrow margin provided by minimal cleared lanes. Inglis doesn't say it explicitly, but reading between the lines, the conclusion is clear. Omaha almost failed. 2 bulldozers prevented that failure. The report includes detailed statistics: beach obstacle density Omaha 0.49, Gold 0.430, Juneau 0.4. That last statistic is damning. Omaha's clearance rate was less than 1/8 of the plan. Yet Omaha succeeded anyway. Inglis conclusion. The lesson of Omaha Beach is that mechanical clearance assets, bulldozers, tank dozers, and specialized armor, are essential for beach assault operations. However, such assets must be provided in sufficient quantities to account for expected losses. The allocation of 16 tank dozers for Omaha, while theoretically adequate, provided no margin for error. In the event losses exceeded projections, and success depended upon extraordinary efforts by surviving crews. The extraordinary efforts by surviving crews. That's the official engineering assessment. But Inglis includes something else in his report: personal accounts from engineers who were there. One passage stands out. A lieutenant from the 299th Engineer Combat Battalion, interviewed in July 1944, stated, "We couldn't have done it without the dozers. We'd set charges below a gap, but the obstacles were too heavy for us to move them farther. The dozers pushed them aside. They dragged whole clusters at once, and they kept working when we had to take cover. I watched one dozer work for 3 hours straight. The blade was damaged, leaking hydraulic fluid, but it kept pushing. The crew kept dismounting to hook up cables running through machine gun fire to do it. I don't know their names, but they saved our lives." The British report on the Commonwealth beaches tells a different but complementary story. At Sword, Juneau, and Gold, the specialized armor, Alvarez crab mine flails, fascine carriers, worked as designed. But even there, bulldozers were essential. From the 80th Assault Squadron report on Juneau Beach, the Alvarez teams successfully breached the seawall and cleared initial paths through the obstacles. However, widening these paths to permit vehicle traffic required the D7 armored bulldozers and D9 dozers attached to our squadrons. The Alvarez could create a gap. The bulldozers turned the gap into a usable exit. The same pattern at Gold Beach. The specialized armor opened the door. The bulldozers kept it open. At Sword Beach, the Alvarez and crabs had mixed success. Some bogged in mud, some were knocked out by German fire. The report notes beach clearance operations were significantly aided by the employment of D7 bulldozers, which proved more suitable for operation on muddy beaches than the tracked Alvarez. The engineering verdict across all beaches: specialized armor, effective but limited. Bulldozers, simple but essential. The real lesson wasn't about which system was better. It was about redundancy, simplicity, and determination. Redundancy. Have more clearing assets than you think you need, because losses will be higher than projected. Simplicity. Complex systems fail in complex ways. Simple systems, like a bulldozer blade bolted to a tank, are more robust. Determination. Equipment matters. Training matters. But ultimately, success depends on crews who won't stop working even when everything around them is chaos and death. Inglis final paragraph. The obstacle clearance operations of 6 June 1944 demonstrated that defensive engineering can achieve near-decisive results. The German obstacle program came remarkably close to preventing Allied landings at Omaha Beach. Only through the combination of specialized equipment, conventional equipment adapted for specialized use, and extraordinary personal courage, were the obstacles overcome. Future amphibious operations must account for the possibility that obstacles alone can determine the outcome of an assault. Extraordinary personal courage. That's the engineering assessment of what happened when Sergeant Beatson kept his damaged tank dozer working after Lieutenant Klotz died. That's the technical term for men who dismounted under fire to attach cables to obstacles. That's how military engineers describe crews who kept working while their friends died around them. Extraordinary personal courage. It's accurate, but it doesn't capture it. There is a photograph taken on the afternoon of June 6, 1944, from a reconnaissance aircraft flying over Omaha Beach. The photo shows easy red sector. The tide is out. You can see the obstacle belt clearly. Hundreds of poles and gates and hedgehogs, dark shadows on pale sand. And cutting through the center of the frame, you can see the gaps. Very not neat. Very not symmetrical. Very rough paths through the obstacle field, obstacles pushed to the sides in irregular piles. If you look closely, you can see vehicles moving through the gaps. Tiny shapes. Trucks, jeeps, half-tracks, tanks. Very streaming inland following the cleared paths. And at the edge of one gap you can see a tank with something attached to the front. The resolution isn't good enough to identify it clearly, but based on the shape and the time and location, it's almost certainly a tank dozer. Still working. Still clearing. Even at 1600 hours, 10 hours after HA hour. This photograph represents the fundamental truth about D-Day: complexity lost. Simplicity won. Rommel's engineers designed a masterpiece. They calculated angles and weights. They positioned obstacles with mathematical precision. They mined them carefully. They integrated them into a comprehensive defensive system with overlapping fields of fire and redundant barriers. It was 1940s military engineering at its absolute peak, and it almost worked. The obstacles at Omaha destroyed or damaged approximately 50 of the first-wave landing craft. They killed hundreds of men. They delayed the invasion by hours. They came shockingly close to stopping it entirely. But they didn't, because on the other side there were men with bulldozers. Not sophisticated bulldozers. Not specialized armor designed over years of development. Just standard commercial bulldozer blades bolted onto standard Sherman tanks. And those men. Tank crews who weren't supposed to be engineers, who had only a few months of training with the equipment, who were operating damaged vehicles under constant fire, kept working. They pushed obstacles that weighed a ton. They dragged clusters of obstacles simultaneously. They worked while their officers died. They worked while their crew members were killed. They worked until the tide forced them to stop. And they cleared 600 yards of beach, 8 of the beach frontage, through which 34,000 men landed. The lesson of D-Day isn't that simplicity is always better than complexity. Rommel's complex obstacles were devastatingly effective. The British specialized armor was invaluable on the Commonwealth beaches. The lesson is that in war, the solution that works is the one that keeps working when everything goes wrong. Complex systems are fragile. They have failure points. They require specific conditions. They need trained operators and maintenance and support. Simple systems are robust. They can be operated with minimal training. They can keep functioning when damaged. They don't have elaborate failure modes. They either work or they don't. And human determination can make a simple system accomplish extraordinary things. A bulldozer blade is a steel plate on hydraulic rams. That's it. No complex mechanisms. No sophisticated electronics. Just steel and hydraulics. But operated by men who refused to quit that steel plate, moved obstacles that engineering teams couldn't budge. It cleared a beach that was supposed to be impregnable. It changed history. 50 years later, military historians studying D-Day tend to focus on the dramatic moments. The Rangers at Pointe du Hoc, the paratroopers at Sainte-Mère-Église, the infantry assaulting the bluffs at Omaha. These are important stories. They deserve to be told. But there's another story that's rarely told. The story of 2 tank dozers working methodically through the chaos, pushing and dragging obstacles, while men died around them. It's not as dramatic. It's not as photogenic. It's just engineering work. But it's the story that explains how D-Day succeeded when it should have failed. Hitler's engineers trusted the Atlantic Wall. They trusted the mathematics of obstacle density and mine distribution and interlocking fields of fire, and they were right to trust it. It was brilliant engineering. But they didn't account for 2 bulldozers operated by men who wouldn't stop. That's the engineering truth about D-Day. That's the lesson. German obstacles at Omaha Beach 6. Obstacle types deployed 3 750 individual obstacles and placed 401 pounds average weight per obstacle, 0.49 obstacles per linear yard. Approximately 75 mined with teller mines or artillery shells. Construction time 4 months. Labor force. Thousands of soldiers and conscripted workers. Cost unknown, but representing massive material and labor investment. American response 16. M4 tank dozers allocated to Omaha Beach. 8 assigned to 741st Tank Battalion. 8 assigned to 743rd Tank Battalion. Cost per tank dozer kit, approximately $500. Training time, 8 weeks. Total procurement cost approximately $8,000. D-Day results. 6 tank dozers reached the beach. 4 destroyed or disabled in first 2 hours. 2 survived and operated through D-Day. 600 yards of beach cleared by late morning. 34,000 men landed at Omaha by evening. 2,000 casualties at Omaha Beach. Casualty, among obstacle clearing. Personnel, Lieutenant John Klotz, killed in action June 6, 1944. Special Engineer Task Force, 40 casualty rate. Navy Combat, Demolition Units. Similar losses, 741st Tank Battalion. 30 tanks lost, 19 men killed or missing. GAP teams 16 teams committed, average 50 casualties. Post-war Sergeant William Beatson awarded. Silver Star survived. The war returned home to Pennsylvania, died 1989. Tank dozer crews. Most survived D-Day. Many fought through France and Germany. 741st Tank Battalion. Rebuilt after D-Day, participated in remainder of European campaign. M4 tank dozer. Became standard equipment in U.S. armored divisions. Used extensively in Pacific Theater. The final accounting M4 tank dozers. Produced during World War II. Approximately 1,500 lives. Saved by obstacle clearance. At Omaha. Impossible to calculate, but estimates range from hundreds to thousands. Recognition for tank dozer crews. Minimal. In historical accounts. Museum displays of M4 tank dozer. Rare. Most displays focus on gun tanks. Graves in Normandy. American Cemetery. 9. 387 total. Tourists walk among them taking photographs. Very few know what they're looking at. Very few know that these obstacles almost stopped D-Day. And almost no one knows the story of 2 bulldozers that made sure they didn't. In the Normandy American Cemetery, Lieutenant John Klotz's grave is in Section D, Row 18, Grave 32. The inscription reads, John Klotz, 1st Lieutenant, 741st Tank, Ben, New York. June 6, 1944. No mention of the tank dozer. No mention of the obstacles cleared. No mention of the hours spent working under fire before he was killed. Just the essential facts. Name, rank, unit, date. But that's enough. Because the real memorial isn't on a gravestone. It's in the 34,000 men who landed at Omaha Beach on D-Day and survived because someone cleared the obstacles. It's in the generations of their children and grandchildren who exist because those men came home. It's in the world that emerged after 1944. Flawed and imperfect but free. Because the invasion succeeded. 2 bulldozers changed D-Day. 1 decision. 10 seconds. The space between keep working and give up. Because Lieutenant Klotz and Sergeant Beatson and Sergeant Dom and the unnamed crew members didn't give up, the obstacles were cleared. Because the obstacles were cleared, vehicles could land. Because vehicles could land, strongpoints could be flanked. Because strongpoints were flanked, the beach was secured. Because the beach was secured, the invasion succeeded. Because the invasion succeeded. The war was won. One act of determination. Hundreds of lives saved. Thousands of lives affected. The bulldozers weren't designed for combat. They were designed to move earth, to clear construction sites, to do simple, unglamorous work. But on June 6, 1944, they became the most important weapons on Omaha Beach. Not because of their firepower. They had none. Not because of their sophistication. They had little. Because they worked. And because the men operating them wouldn't stop working. Hitler's engineers trusted the Atlantic Wall. They were right to trust it. But they didn't account for the determination of men who refused to let obstacles, no matter how brilliantly designed, prevent them from doing their job. That's the real story of D-Day.